Andor Season 2, Episodes 1, 2, and 3 dropped. This was a really concerning first bundle of episodes for me as far as the whole season goes. I'm going to preface the entire video by saying that you need to keep in mind with this story that each 3 episodes are covering 1 year of time, and presumably we're going to get roughly a 1 year jump in between each 3 episodes until we end at the beginning of Rogue One, presumably. There's some good moments, obviously, throughout the episodes, including some that are causing what I would call fake controversy, or at least overblown. But my biggest issue is that we got 3 episodes that felt like they were jumping all over the place story-wise, and we don't really accomplish much. There's also some really heavy-handed political commentary, which I found to be annoying. I think the floor for this show is pretty high. It's very competently made. You can tell they put a ton of money into it. Obviously, all the visuals are great. One thing the show nails again, just like it did in season 1, is that all of the planets and places feel different. The cultures feel different. This one obviously feels very clean and lavish, which obviously feels a lot different than where Dedra lives, for example, or the farms that Bix is at. So you can tell they did put a lot of care into it. I don't think that these writers will do anything that would just destroy a character. But the problem that I had with season 1, and it sort of seems to be lingering into this season, and it might just be an issue with Tony Gilroy in general, just based on Rogue One and Andor, is sort of the issue of just, you have characters that move the story along, but it's kind of hard to care about them. And again, they're not poorly written, they're not overtly stupid, there's just no real attachment. Andor throughout season 1 felt like he was just kind of along for the ride in his own show. And I thought his part of the first 3 episodes was by far the worst. And again, ran to the same type of thing where it just feels like he's there to show you different parts of what's going on and then leave. And before I get into the specifics, the last thing that I'll say is this. If I had been tasked with having 4 parts where each part covers 1 year of time and the end is leading into the big rebellion, my goal would have been to have kind of a flashpoint event in each part. Probably have the good guys win in 1 and 2, maybe small battles, lose a big one in part 3, so everything feels like it's lost. And then 4, you have your good guys come out on top. Everything is primed and ready to go with the good guys having momentum going into Rogue One. So for me, the fact that they used 3 episodes to cover what probably could have been covered in about half of 1 episode, or some of it even in just lines of dialogue, I find to be a strange decision and really concerning about the rest of the season if the events that happen are going to feel like just things that happen or substantial events leading into the rebellion, full blown, obviously Alderaan getting blown up and all that. I think what I'm going to do is just go place by place because the story really jumps around a lot throughout the episodes because they're trying to fit in so much. I'm going to start with Mon Mothma's because that was probably my favorite part, even though again, you almost could have started the show just with the wedding ceremony or the engagement ceremony and used that time elsewhere. But that aside, I like how hers starts with this pretty long one shot. Sometimes people call one shots gimmicky. I think it can work depending on context. The use of it here, I think, to make it feel like she's just nonstop, on the go, really being overwhelmed, I think works for it. I really like her and Luthen's relationship. And the second half of episode 3 for her, I thought was just really good overall. Again, a lot of time spent on engagement rituals, considering how much they're trying to fit in. But there's still just really good parts to what she's got going on, particularly between her and her daughter and her and Luthen near the end. Just to give a little bit of reference, in the episode, you see Mon Mothma at about 15 minutes and then not again until about 40. So she's only getting a couple minutes of screen time. Her time is used to show people showing up to the party. Even characters like Vel here have kind of been pushed to the side, which is a bummer considering how relevant they were the first season. And what this first episode really is doing regarding Mon Mothma is just setting up how many people want her help, including her friend Tay, who's getting desperate. And the other part of Mon Mothma's story is to set up that they don't know where Cassian is and they're getting concerned. And a lot of this conversation is really to push that Tay's wife left him, his life's fallen apart, Mon Mothma is being pressured by him, she's being pressured by her husband who's being jealous. She's obviously getting constant pressure from Luthen like she always does. And this all culminates in her having a rave and being drunk. And I know it sounds like I'm being a bit sarcastic, but it's not bad or anything. It just doesn't feel like a good use of time to me, or at least not as much time as they use on this. Even the conversation being had on screen right now is about Vel and balancing work and life and how they have to work because they're in the middle of a revolution. So it's all on theme and on point. Dialogue is perfectly fine. It all sounds natural. You just kind of wish there was a bit more oomph to the story. And Tay just keeps coming to her over and over to mention his concerns. He's getting really drunk. He's kind of throwing in her face that they covered up her financial issues. And in the sense that you feel the pressure and annoyance from him that she would be feeling, I think it works well. It just seems like we kind of take the scenic route to get where we're going here. We keep seeing Clea check in for Andor. Obviously, he's not around for a while. And they're all kind of freaking out, so you know that he's reliable at this point. And then Luthen keeps talking to Mon Mothma. He's obviously concerned that they're going to get betrayed because he's seen everything. He's here. And she just keeps saying, we're supposed to talk on Coruscant in a week, and I'll get you the number that we need to help him out or take care of him. We get a lot of time establishing the ceremonies and seeing the garb and the culture. All fine. Good world building. It just feels kind of wasted on characters that feel like vessels. And to start episode 3, this is probably my favorite scene with Mon Mothma, where she tells her daughter if she doesn't want to do it because her daughter's been upset with the boy she's engaged to, that she doesn't have to. No one's going to look down on her for it in the long run. And kind of she has to live with this decision. And I thought this was really nice to see kind of where she draws the line at who and what she's willing to sacrifice for the rebellion. And it also allows for an interesting character moment for Leda, who I don't know if she'll become a bigger part of the story or not, but the groundwork has certainly been laid for her since she chose to take on this responsibility or burden of the arranged marriage. And we get a nice scene here where we see Leda and her fiance gifted this crazy rare gift that only 9 are accounted for out of the 12 that exist. It had been taken by Rakatan invaders, which I've only ever seen in KOTOR. And again, just another reminder for Tay that it seems like everyone in the rebellion is flourishing while his life is in shambles. And Luthen is just continually pressing Mon Mothma about the number, about how bad his situation is, trying to figure out what's going on. And she just keeps putting it off. Although this did have my favorite line probably in the first couple episodes, where Luthen and Mon Mothma are talking and she keeps saying she'll get the number. And he eventually just says, he's blackmailing you forever, will always be vulnerable. And she says, I don't know what you're talking about. And he goes, how nice for you. And I just love the nature of that interaction, that he's kind of annoyed, but also just accepted that he's the one who has to get shit done when people don't want to. And he'll do what's necessary when other people refuse to see the situation for what it is. This leads to her getting drunk, and we don't really see anything for the rest of the episode from her, except her kind of trying to forget about real life and just raving away. But we see Tay's driver has been replaced by Cinta, so Luthen did what you expect him to do and not allow there to be loose ends that endanger them all. So that's it for the Mon Mothma part of the story. Like I said, there are things in there that I like, but I also feel like you really have to wonder if this could have been consolidated down a bit to even starting with that conversation with her daughter. You know, you get a little montage of the wedding ceremony, and then you have other events taking place, and you can still have Tay applying pressure and indirectly trying to extort Mon Mothma, putting the rebels at risk while you have other things going on, and not 3 episodes of a wedding to build up to a payoff where I don't know if I would say it's worth it, that we get a kind of side character is implicitly going to die and the ceremony happens. That's Mon Mothma's part in the first 3 episodes. I'm going to move on to the Empire now, primarily Dedra. We don't get a ton of time with the Empire in this first part. It's primarily just setting up their long-term plans. And we know that Dedra has been pulled into Krennic's inner circle, along with Yularen, who was already there. I liked Yularen in the Rebels cartoon and the Thrawn books, by the way, if you're interested in other media. And what it boils down to is that they need an energy source from the Gormans, who only have about 800,000 people on their planet. And for me, this is where the meta stuff really comes in, and it feels heavy-handed and like it doesn't fit in the story. It feels really unnatural. Krennic goes on this whole big tangent about energy independence and how the Empire needs it to become essentially more stable on its own. They mentioned this resource called calcite, which which is apparently super valuable. But it just goes on and on about how the Empire needs it and it wants to take it, but it doesn't want to look bad. And I think part of the reason this all feels so out of place is because the Empire wouldn't give a fuck about dealing with the Gormans. And they talk about how they have a 3-year window. Obviously, all this is just setting up, presumably for them to take it over by force at the end of the third part, I'm guessing. But the Empire in this same show is shown going around harassing citizens, oppressing people. At this point, the Emperor's been in charge for roughly 20 years. So I don't believe for a second they wouldn't just go in and take what they fucking need. And then they had these guys brag about their propaganda campaign, and they really lean heavily into the Nazi aesthetic here. And energy independence doesn't even make any fucking sense. You're the tyrannical government running everything. They don't care about letting pretty much anyone resist. And independence implies that you're dependent on an outside body for energy, which the Gormans are not outside. And presumably the energy they're using now is all from our own galaxy. So the whole thing just feels like they had something they wanted to shove in there and just did it at the cost of the story. And Dedra both looks horrified, but also comes up with the idea of a false flag operation, which Krennic seems to like. Presumably that's where we're headed. I also really hated the way that this episode was edited in this middle part. We're just jumping back and forth like every minute and a half or 2 minutes between Krennic and then between Andor, and then just over and over and over. And it doesn't feel like any of the scenes are allowed to breathe. Dedra says that she wants to work on Axis, aka Luthen, and finding out who he is. And Yularen says tough titties. Krennic assigned it, so you're on the Gorm project. And he has a line in here that's one of those that I think the writers were proud of and thought sounded clever, that I don't think really makes any sense, where Yularen says, catch him first and then make him famous, as if it were that simple to use him as propaganda once he's already been caught. You run the risk of him being a martyr. Obviously, the fact that he's involved in everything, but you can't catch him, makes him more valuable. So I just thought it was a really dumb line. And then we see Syril plugging in his equivalent from the first season, essentially. Not really much to say about the scene. He's just kind of pumping up his own importance here. We get a brief scene here where Syril is dreading them having dinner with his mom. And that's it for Dedra in episode 2. Really not a ton happening. In episode 3, there's not a ton more for them to do either. Cyril's mom comes over. Although I do really enjoy this scene with Dedra. It kind of feels like, what are we doing here? Like she should be investigating. You kind of want to do the poker with a stick. Come on, do something. Cyril's mom is being really rude and very obviously petty. He leaves the room for a minute, and then Dedra just flips. She doesn't start yelling or anything, but just very calmly but directly says enough's enough. So I like that scene. It's a fun little scene for her. And she guarantees that Syril will call a lot and visit more. But we've used a quarter of the season. She got assigned to a job that she didn't want to be on and had dinner with Cyril's mom. It just doesn't feel super efficient. I'm going to move on to Bix and Brasso's story on Mina Rao, which is essentially a farm planet. This is the one that also generated what I would call an overblown controversy that I'll get to when we get to the scene. This one for me felt like another really heavy-handed meta storyline that I don't know if it's coherent in the world in certain capacities. I mean, the whole thing is about them being illegal immigrants, the Empire equivalent of ICE checking for documentation. This isn't even specifically related to the rebel movement. Again, it's like you used a quarter of the season for this. And there are a couple of decent payoffs in the third episode, but just not a great use of time. And of course, the illegal immigrants are farmers and it's harvest season and we need them for the resources. Again, I don't know how much this makes sense. Like, why would immigration to here specifically be illegal when there's all kinds of backwaters that people just fucking go to? Not to mention they're spending resources on this instead of the unlimited energy, independent energy, blah, blah, blah plan, which seems way more fucking important than whether some people that got to this planet without proper documentation are farming. This part, I'll go ahead and just say, is really slow. It's pretty much just them conversing about how to fake their ID or get away from the Empire long enough that they move along. And then the one Empire ICE agent keeps hitting on Bix, and this leads up to him attempting to rape her. There's a few facets. I'm going to talk about this really quickly before I just kind of continue on with the actual story. I've seen a lot of people sharing this headline where the Andor creator says that we're all the product of rape. And with no context, it does sound bad. But if you actually look at what he says, I kind of agree with the statement that just mathematically and historically speaking, someone in your ancestry has probably been raped or raped someone. That's just sort of a numbers game over the presumably hundreds of generations you could trace your lineage back to if we lived in Assassin's Creed. And again, we really just keep beating home that they're all just peaceful and wanting to farm and make a living. And we keep having to see the B2 emo droid, another dumbass droid name. And it spends 2 episodes building up to this weird officer trying to abuse his power and trying to fuck Adria Arjona, aka Bix, because she's hot. And this is the extent of the physical contact in the attempted rape. And this part I thought was well done. They break into a little skirmish. She hits him in the head with a hammer and he's all groggy and then dies. And then obviously the Empire's like, you need to come with us because now you murdered him. I just don't think it's a big deal. It was established enough that he was hitting on her and trying to get with her, trying to abuse his power. We've seen Jabba have Leia in the slave outfit and lick her face. If you've read the books, I'm sure there's rape in there. Even the books that I read, Darth Xana seduces men and uses her sexuality as a weapon, as does Githany. I mean, we're talking about a series where the protagonist of the prequel trilogy mass murders children in a school. We've seen planets blow up, limbs cut off, heads cut off. I mean, give me a break pretending this shit's a big deal. I thought it was decently well crafted for the amount of time they used. Poor Bix can't get a break. That's kind of the extent of my thoughts on that. Although we do shockingly get some black on black crime here between this officer and Bix's friend. But this is where everything kind of culminates, and we see Brasso die, despite Cassian showing up pretty conveniently just in the nick of time. But it doesn't matter because it doesn't save him anyway. And we see for the more youthful members of the rebellion, the reality of what it costs sinking in. Not a bad theme to have or goal to establish for a character, but does anyone give a fuck about this guy? It's kind of the problem that you're going to run into a lot in this show, I think. So yeah, I mainly thought the Bix Brasso part was just boring more than anything. Couple decent scenes, an important character death, but kind of weird to just have this whole side story that's not directly related to the rebellion for a 4th year season. And Bix was already going against the Empire. She already had plenty of reason to. Obviously, they tortured her last season. So this just kind of feels like making her character suffer and pushing meta bullshit as far as I can tell. And at the end of the day, the biggest problem, again, is just this does not feel like a very efficient use of time. I saved Andor for last because I just didn't feel like talking about his. His part of the story is just clown world. I absolutely fucking hated it. There's a couple good moments in here. I actually like this opening scene with him talking to the other rebellion asset, trying to comfort her. And what they're going for to communicate in his part about the rebels being inexperienced, kind of skittish and scared and untrusting, lacking in leadership in many capacities. I think all that stuff works, but how it goes about getting there, I found to be absolutely moronic. And for me, after that first scene that I liked with him comforting his help, I thought it was straight downhill. Immediately, he goes to steal this prototype tie. He's like, this isn't what I trained on. And then this ends up being central to the first 3 episodes that no one knows how to pilot this fucking thing. And just as a matter of world building, I don't fucking believe it. I mean, to me, what you're trying to do here is the equivalent of saying that a 2020 version of a car is so different from the 2025 version that you can't even guess at how to drive it. Like, what sense would it make, especially in Star Wars where the technology is generally stagnant, that the controls would be that different, that he has no clue how to even try to fly it? It just doesn't make any fucking sense. If he was going from one type of ship to another, you know, at least there'd be something there, even though they'd probably still have certain aspects in common. But going from one tie to another, they should be almost indiscernible as far as the controls, at least to the basic degree of just flying it. And then we get this escape scene, which is bizarre. And this is kind of a problem again throughout the whole first couple episodes, where he can't even get it out of the hangar. And then all of a sudden he's lighting up the soldiers. And then he gets it out of the hangar and he's crashing into rocks and shit, which if you want to say it's more durable because it's a prototype and it's brand new, fine. But then he escapes, presumably more experienced pilots chasing him. And then the way that he kills them is to shoot this little rock bridge that they're both kind enough to fly under instead of over. You can see the top of it on the screen right there. I mean, I would get this if maybe there was like a giant cave and it had a bunch of exit points. So they had to follow him in or they wouldn't know where he's going to come out. But this is literally like you can just see over the top of it. Why the fuck would they fly under it after he shot it? And that's how he escapes. And then as soon as he escapes, it goes straight back to him not knowing how to fly the fucking thing again. Even landing it, he seems like he's having issues. And then once he escapes his own dumbass friends, it looks like he's having issues again. So it just is really all over the place. For me, his part of the story is kind of like Jar Jar Binks meets Lord of the Flies. So we pretty much spend the next episode and a half with him as a hostage by the people he was supposed to meet up with. And they're all very young and very stupid. These guys don't know how to manage water. They don't know how to manage food. None of them want to take the initiative to attack when they're maybe 100 yards away. They talk about the animals being a threat and then completely forget about them. And they solve their problems with rock, paper, scissors. They try once to fly it and accidentally shoot the guns and then just don't try again. Again, the controls being super duper special and unique is a huge part of the fucking plot for this part. And eventually once the animals start in, Andor makes a break for it and gets his ship back. And now we've essentially wasted 2 episodes to get the point across that the rebellion is unorganized. My preference would have much rather been maybe he's super ambitious, he's really taking the initiative, you know, maybe he asked for his own squad or group or whatever, and things seem like they're going well, and then once they actually get into a tight situation, he cracks, things are out of control, they don't have any actual leadership, a bunch of people get killed, and then you have him become a better leader as the series goes on. And now you've shown that the rebels don't have very good leadership, they're inexperienced, and Andor has a path to go on instead of just sit here and watch kids play rock, paper, scissors in the dark and eat fucking disgusting mangoes or whatever the hell they were for 2 episodes. And this all leads to him fucking up some stormtroopers and saving Bix and her friend and seeing Brasso die. Even within his own story, it doesn't really seem like he's the one taking initiative as much as being dragged along. This is kind of similar to the first season where he said he was looking for his sister and then he immediately gets swept up into the bigger thing. And that's kind of what they do here where he's helping comfort a rebel. He's taking the initiative and then we fuck off for the better part of 2 episodes until he saves his buddies. I just did not like his part of the story at all. The good thing about these time jumps is that you can kind of justify some character changes or situational changes between each 3 episode drop we're going to get. So I really hope that we use this first part as kind of a springboard into a slightly more organized rebellion. He's more in a leadership position of some kind, and we kind of get the ball rolling. Because these first 3 episodes were a slog. And it's bizarre because on one hand, it felt like they sped through everything happening. But then on the other, if you look at where you started and where you ended, it just doesn't feel like much. So there was some okay stuff in these first 3 episodes. Story-wise, it felt like there was a lot of waste. Character-wise, there was some decent stuff from Mon Mothma. And obviously, Luthen was always great. We had a fun little scene with Dedra. Couple okay scenes with Andor and Bix, but I am very concerned now about the rest of the season because it's already going to be disjointed with these year time jumps, and I just don't know how they're going to tether together a story that is compelling to watch. The good news is they could literally have the characters all together next episode and just use a throwaway line and kind of move the story forward in that way if they really wanted to. I'm hoping that I enjoy part 2 a lot more than this one, but it is hard to be optimistic with the continual string of bad season 2s that we've been getting across the board. So at this point, I guess I'm just in wait and see mode. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. I try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.